In the late 12th century, in the rugged mountains and green valleys of the Caucasus, a kingdom rose to unexpected glory under a ruler almost no one in the medieval world saw coming. Not a king in shining mail, but a woman. Her name was Tamar. Her people called her Tamar Mepe. Not Queen Tamar, but King Tamar. Under her rule, Georgia reached the height of its power, its borders stretching farther than ever before, its churches and cities shining with wealth and culture. Her reign would be remembered as a golden age, a time of military triumph, artistic genius, and deep religious devotion. This is the story of Queen Tamar of Georgia, her life, her battles, her faith, and the legacy that still shapes a nation. Imagine the world into which Tamar was born. It's around the year 1160. Crusader states line the eastern Mediterranean. The Byzantine Empire is weakening. Powerful Muslim dynasties struggle for dominance. Nomadic tribes sweep across the steppe. Between these great powers, in the mountains between Europe and Asia, lies the Kingdom of Georgia. Georgia is not a backwater. It sits on vital trade routes that connect the Black Sea to the Caspian, the Christian world to the Islamic world, and the steppe to the Middle East. Its kings claim ancient royal blood. Georgian churches, carved from stone, cling to hillsides and riverbanks. Monks copy manuscripts in candlelit rooms. Farmers and merchants live under a monarchy that, despite constant threats, has been growing stronger. At the center of this kingdom stands King George III, a tough, sometimes brutal ruler, trying to keep his nobles in line and his enemies at bay. He has a daughter, Tamar, and in a world that expects kings to be male, her very existence raises a problem. What happens when George dies? Will the nobles accept a woman on the throne? Or will the country tear itself apart? Tamar grows up in a court full of tension and intrigue. When she is still a child, one of the most serious crises of her father's reign erupts. A powerful noble family supports a rival prince named Demna in a major rebellion. The goal is simple: overthrow George, replace him with a king they can control. The rebellion is crushed brutally. Demna is captured and punished. The nobles are dealt with harshly. The message is clear: George III will not be easily removed. But he learns a lesson from this attempt. He understands that when his time comes, if the succession is not crystal clear, the nobles will move again. They won't hesitate to challenge Tamar's right to rule, so he takes a radical step. In 1178, while he is still alive and very much in power, he crowns his teenage daughter Tamar as his co-ruler. This is more than just a symbolic gesture. It makes her officially a monarch alongside him. She learns to rule at his side, to sit in councils, to watch how he deals with nobles, clergy, and foreign envoys. She is being trained in public to be the next sovereign. At the same time, this second coronation sends a political message. When I die, the person who rules Georgia will be Tamar, not some distant cousin, not some ambitious noble. Tamar. For a medieval kingdom, this is a bold experiment. In 1184, King George III dies. Tamar is crowned again, this time not as co-ruler, but as the sole monarch of Georgia. She's probably around 18 years old. Her position is legal, but not secure. The moment her father is gone, the political landscape shifts. Old enemies, previously kept in check by George's firm hand, sense opportunity. Many nobles, still bitter about the harsh punishments of the past, see a young woman on the throne and think, now is our chance. They don't openly deny her right to rule. Instead, they try to control her. They pressure her at court. They demand offices, lands, influence. They expect her to be a ceremonial figurehead while they pull the strings from behind. Some probably hope they can marry her to a man of their choosing and rule through him. Tamar has powerful allies too. Her aunt Rusudan, a strong and influential woman, supports her. The head of the Georgian church backs her as the legitimate sovereign, but Tamar's early years are a delicate balancing act. She needs time to consolidate her power, and she cannot afford open civil war at the beginning of her reign. So she compromises. Some hostile nobles are restored to favor. A council of aristocrats gains more influence. Tamar plays the diplomatic game, granting titles and positions, soothing egos, making sure that for the moment, the kingdom holds together. But the nobles have another card to play: her marriage. In a medieval monarchy, a queen's marriage is not a private matter. It is a political weapon. Tamar knows this, and so do the aristocrats. Under their pressure, she marries a foreign prince, Yuri Bogolyubsky, a member of the princely house from Vladimir Suzdal, in the lands of Rus. On paper, this seems like a good match. It strengthens ties with a powerful neighboring region. It gives Tamar a husband with royal blood, someone who could lead armies, represent the dynasty, perhaps produce heirs. In reality, the marriage is a disaster. Chroniclers describe Yuri as violent, arrogant, and morally corrupt. Whether these reports are exaggerated by his enemies or not, the relationship quickly breaks down. He makes enemies at court. He clashes with Tamar's supporters. He becomes a liability. And here, Tamar does something very unusual for a medieval queen. She refuses to tolerate a bad political marriage. With the support of the church, she pushes for a divorce. In 1187, the marriage is annulled. This is no small thing. Divorce at this level is not simply a personal breakup. It is a public statement that she will not be controlled by the man the nobles forced upon her. Of course, Yuri doesn't quietly fade away. Some nobles rally around him as a figurehead. Twice, he returns with armies, hoping to seize the throne and overthrow Tamar. Twice, Georgian forces defeat him. The nobles backing him are punished or sidelined. Each failed rebellion does something important. It weakens her enemies, and it shows the country that Tamar is not a fragile, passive ruler. She is a survivor. As the dust settles, she moves to choose a partner on her own terms. Her second husband is David Soslan, a prince from the Alans, the ancestors of today's Ossetians, from the northern Caucasus. He's not imposed on her by hostile nobles. He is chosen with care as a trusted ally and a proven military commander. Their marriage is a partnership. David leads armies in the field, helping to crush remaining rebellions and defend Georgia's frontiers. Tamar rules as the sovereign monarch. He is not king in his own right. She is. Together, they have children who will continue the royal line: a son, George, and a daughter, Rusudan. By this point, Tamar has passed through the most dangerous stage of her reign. The hostile nobles have been humbled. The pretender Yuri has been defeated. Tamar has shown that she can stand up to pressure, resist manipulation, and make decisions about marriage, about war, about governance, that serve the kingdom, not her enemies. Now that her authority is secure at home, she turns outward, and the world takes notice. Under Tamar, Georgia becomes the dominant power in the region. To understand how dramatic this is, imagine a map of the Caucasus and its surroundings around the year 1200. To the west lies the crumbling Byzantine Empire and the rising powers of Anatolia. To the south, Armenian kingdoms and Muslim states. To the east, the lands around the Caspian and the Persian world beyond. To the north, the great Eurasian steppe. In the middle of all these stands Georgia, no longer just defending its borders, but projecting power far beyond them. One of the most celebrated victories of Tamar's reign comes at the Battle of Shamkor in 1195. Georgian armies, often led by David Soslan, confront the forces of the Eldeguzid Atabegs, a powerful Muslim dynasty that controls parts of what is now Azerbaijan. The details vary by source, but the result is clear. The Georgians win a decisive victory. Shamkor and surrounding territories fall under Georgian influence. This sends a message across the region. Georgia is not merely holding its own, it is expanding. A few years later comes another defining moment, the Battle of Bassiani, around 1202 to 1203, against the Seljuk Sultanate of Rum in Anatolia. Legend says that the Sultan mocked Georgia for being ruled by a woman and demanded Tamar's submission. Whether or not those exact words were spoken, we can be sure of this. A major Muslim power expected Georgia to bow. It did not. Under Tamar's authority and with David Soslan commanding in the field, Georgian forces meet the Sultan's army near Bassiani and defeat them. The victory is not just military, it is symbolic. The idea that a kingdom led by a woman is somehow weak is shattered. The message spreads. Underestimate Tamar at your peril. But her most creative geopolitical move comes in 1204. That year, the Fourth Crusade, which was supposed to head for the Holy Land, instead turns on Christian Constantinople, the great capital of the Byzantine Empire. The city is sacked. The empire splinters into fragments. In this chaos, Tamar sees opportunity. Members of the Komnenos family, Byzantium's former ruling dynasty, and relatives of Tamar's, flee west to the Black Sea region. With Tamar's support, political, possibly even military, they establish the Empire of Trebizond along the Black Sea coast. It is a new Orthodox state, friendly to Georgia, acting as a buffer and a partner. Georgian influence now stretches directly and indirectly from the Caucasus highlands to the shores of the Black Sea and into Anatolia. At the height of her power, Tamar's Georgia controls the core territories of eastern and western Georgia, significant parts of Armenia, regions in today's Azerbaijan, vassal and allied states along the Black Sea coast. Trade flows through Georgian lands. Taxes and tributes pour into royal coffers. Gold and silver pay for armies, fortresses, roads, churches, and monasteries. This is the outward face of the Georgian Golden Age. Banners on the wind, armies on the march, foreign envoys bowing at court. But Tamar's legacy is not just written in battles and borders. It is written in ink and stone, in law and liturgy, in how her people imagine justice and holiness. Inside Georgia, Tamar governs as more than just a war leader. She is remembered as a ruler concerned with justice, mercy, and the moral fabric of the kingdom. Contemporary and later sources portray her as deeply pious and personally devout. She fasts, prays, and seeks the counsel of church leaders. But her faith is not confined to private life. It shapes how she rules. Under her reign, there is a sense, especially in Georgian church tradition, that brutality for its own sake is rejected. Her father's harsh methods, which included terrible punishments for rebels, cast a long shadow. Tamar's rule is associated instead with a softer approach, sparing lives where possible, commuting severe punishments, and trying to temper justice with mercy. We have to be careful here. Medieval sources love to idealize beloved rulers, but the pattern of stories is consistent. Tamar listens, she mediates, she shows leniency. She does not tolerate treason, but she is not remembered as cruel. Her relationship with the church is central. Georgia in this era is a deeply Christian society. Monasteries are not only religious centers, but also hubs of education, art, and administration. Tamar supports them lavishly. She grants lands and tax privileges to monasteries, funds the building and renovation of churches, and sponsors the copying of beautifully illuminated manuscripts. Church councils meet during her reign to address moral and doctrinal issues. Tamar attends not just as a pious spectator, but as the sovereign responsible for the health of the kingdom's soul. Over time, the Georgian church comes to see her not just as a good queen, but as something more, a saintly ruler. After her death, she is canonized. In icons and frescoes, she appears with a halo, wearing royal garments, sometimes holding a cross or a model of a church. In the calendar of the Orthodox Church, she is remembered as Holy Right-Believing King Tamar. Notice that title, king, not queen. It's the same word used in her own lifetime. Georgians did not have to choose between seeing her as a woman and seeing her as a sovereign. She was both, fully. If the armies and diplomacy of her reign represent its power, the culture of her court represents its soul. The most famous work of literature associated with Tamar's era is the Georgian national epic, The Knight in the Panther's Skin, by the poet Shota Rustaveli. Written around the end of the 12th or early 13th century, it is widely understood to have been composed at Tamar's court, and it is dedicated to her. This epic is not just a long poem about heroes and adventures. It is a meditation on friendship, loyalty, love, and kingship. Its world feels both fantastical and deeply ethical. Characters wrestle with duty and desire. Rulers are judged not just by their power, but by their wisdom and fairness. One line, often tied to Tamar's reign, declares that lion cubs are equal, whether male or female. In other words, courage and nobility do not belong to one sex alone. For a kingdom ruled by a woman called king, it is hard not to see this as more than coincidence. Rustaveli's poetry and Tamar's political reality echo each other. Together, they create an image of a society where a woman can embody the full virtues of a ruler: strength, justice, generosity, without apology. Art and architecture also flourish under Tamar. Walk in your mind's eye into a Georgian church from this era. From the outside, it might appear simple. Thick stone walls, a dome rising from a cross-shaped floor plan, a carved cross above the entrance. Step inside, and the space blooms with color. Frescoes cover the walls. Christ, the Virgin, saints and angels. Scenes from the Gospels, and sometimes the kings and queens who built or patronized the church. In some of these frescoes, we see Tamar herself. At places like Betania and Vardzia, she is depicted in royal robes, crown on her head, calm and dignified. Sometimes she stands beside her father or her son, linking 3 generations of rulers. In other images, she appears as the central sovereign, the embodiment of the kingdom. Monasteries like Galati, founded earlier by her great predecessor King David the Builder, continue to flourish as centers of learning and burial places for Georgia's kings. Tamar's reign ensures that these institutions remain richly endowed and protected. It is no accident that Georgians look back on Tamar's era as a high point, perhaps the high point, of their medieval civilization. But even golden ages do not last forever. In her later years, Tamar experiences personal loss. David Soslan dies, leaving her a widow. She continues to rule, but the weight of the kingdom is now fully on her shoulders and those of her growing son, George. As she ages, Tamar prepares for the future. She crowns her son, George, as co-ruler, just as her father once did for her. The dynasty appears secure. The kingdom, at least from the inside, seems strong. The true storm is gathering beyond Georgia's horizons. Not long after Tamar's death, the Mongols, the most fearsome military power of the 13th century, will sweep across Asia and into the Caucasus. Their invasions will shatter many of the political structures of the region. Georgia will be hit hard. Its empire will contract. Its independence will be challenged. Its resources will be strained. It's important to say this. The decline that follows is not Tamar's fault. If anything, her strong, centralized kingdom helps Georgia endure the Mongol era better than it otherwise might have. But it does mean that the full glory of Tamar's Georgia shines for only a few decades before the world changes forever. Maybe that's part of why her reign looms so large in memory. It is a bright light that appears just before a long period of turbulence. Tamar's final days are the subject of both history and legend. Sources say that she fell ill while traveling near Gori on royal business. She died in 1213 after nearly 3 decades of rule. Her body, according to most accounts, was first taken to the cathedral at Mtskheta, one of the holiest sites in Georgia, and then to Gelati Monastery, the traditional burial place of the kings. But later stories tell of her remains being moved in secret, perhaps to protect them from invaders, perhaps to rest in the Holy Land. To this day, her exact burial place is not definitively known. Tombs have been suggested, sites proposed, but no universally accepted grave of Tamar has been identified. There is something fitting about this in a way. For a ruler who straddles the line between history and legend, whose image is saintly and royal, the lack of a clear tomb adds to the sense of mystery. What is absolutely clear, though, is her legacy. So what does Tamar mean to Georgia today? First, she is a national symbol. Ask Georgians to name their greatest rulers, and two names tend to appear at the top: David the Builder, who laid the foundations for Georgian strength, and Tamar, who brought that strength to its highest peak. She appears in school books, in artwork, in statues, in the names of streets and institutions. The Order of Queen Tamar is a Georgian state honor. Icons of her hang in churches. In prayers and songs, she is remembered not only as a skilled ruler, but as a saintly intercessor. Second, she is a symbol of faith. For believers, Tamar represents the idea that political power can be exercised with humility and devotion. She is an example of a ruler who combined worldly authority with spiritual responsibility. Her canonization as Holy King Tamar is a reminder that in Georgian religious consciousness, she is not just a politician from the past, but a living figure in the communion of saints. Third, and increasingly in modern times, she is a symbol of women's leadership. In an age when discussions about gender and power are being re-examined everywhere, Tamar's story stands out. Here is a woman who ruled as king, who led armies, negotiated with foreign powers, managed complex internal politics, and presided over a cultural flowering 8 centuries ago. Writers, scholars, and activists point to her as proof that patriarchal structures, even in the Middle Ages, could be challenged and reimagined. Her title, her victories, and her image all testify to the fact that leadership is not inherently male. She is not a modern political figure, of course. We shouldn't project today's ideas too neatly onto her. But the inspiration is real. Finally, she is a reminder of what a small country can achieve. Georgia has often been caught between empires, squeezed by larger powers, invaded, divided, and occupied. And yet, at the height of Tamar's rule, this mountain kingdom was a major player on its own terms, expanding, creating, trading, building, writing. For many Georgians, Tamar's story is a source of pride and hope. It says, "We have been great before. We can be great again."